Hi, I'm Brian Kramer, host of Lead Tail TV, also coach of coaches and author of H2H, Human to Human. I have Karen Steele joining me here today. Karen's a marketer's marketer. From consumer marketing at Apple in the 90s to leading global marketing organizations like VMware and Marketo during key chapters in their industry shaping journeys, Karen's seen marketing from just about every angle. I'm looking forward to hearing her perspective on what she's seen work, what hasn't, and some enduring marketing truths that stands the test of time. Here's Karen. Karen, it is so wonderful to be here with you today. Thank you so much for joining Lead Tail TV.
Thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
Well, I want to jump right in because I know everybody wants to hear about a lot about your, not just your background, but also, you know, some of the marketing advice that you cover and the things that you do. It's so fascinating. I've been through your bio. You and I, we've spoken on stage together and had a fun time. So it's wonderful to be back here and talk to you about just everything that's going on in your world and what you're seeing coming up in marketing land. The first thing I wanted to talk about was actually something that I spotted on your LinkedIn profile. It looks like you've worked at a slew of big companies, like, you know, Apple and Informatica, Saba, I think you said,
Yep.
Marketo, and VMware. So, you know, little companies. And I noticed that often you were at those companies right when they were about to have a significant moment
Yep.
in time. Tell me about that. What is the significance as that happened almost at every company that you've been with?
Yeah. So, first of all, again, Brent, I'm thrilled to be on this show and happy to share any insights I can. I think we're at a really interesting moment for marketers, and I think there's great learning and networking that we can all share. I'm very fortunate and proud of the brands that I've worked at. And I have tended to join companies, big, small, medium size, that are in points of transformation or in some factors chaos. And it's a great moment, I think, for marketers to really put their foot forward, whether you're at a leading brand that is in category creation mode, or you are a brand that is, struggling to define yourself. I've had a lot of those moments, and I'm happy to, give you insight into any one of those that you would be interested in.
That is, I mean, there's so many things that we could talk about. So I'm going to try and really narrow them down because
Great.
marketing's such a big space. I'm curious, you say now is the best time. What makes it now?
I think right now, in the B2B world, software world, which is where I come from, companies are really struggling with pipeline creation. And so I think a lot of focus has been put on the marketer to really drive revenue and pipe, which absolutely is critical. And it's always part of the makeup of the marketing mix. But I think more than ever, companies have to be able to position themselves for longevity and the long haul, if you will. And so I think it's super important to build relationships with influencers and customers and the ecosystem that you participate in, and make sure that you're playing that long game, as well as doing everything you can as a marketer to support sales, and create pipeline and create efficiencies around the channel of pipeline, because that's obviously critical. But most of the companies I've worked for over the years have been, transformative in the way that they've had to shift brands or create net new brands to be relevant in the market. And I think today marketers have to really think about that relevancy, with all the economic challenges and a lot of questions about investing in marketing right now, at a time when people are scared and people don't know who's going back to work and what the buying cycles truly look like, etc. But we have to have some cadence where people believe that some of the things we've done in the past still work. And I fundamentally believe in that. I believe there are a lot of lessons learned over the years that we can truly bring to market today.
Tell me about maybe one or two of those lessons, like things that really come up for you as super important.
Yep. So super important to me at any company I've been at, big, small, struggling, is always just having a relevant place in the market where your customers can relate to who you are and what you do. So I think really great narratives and storytelling are fundamental today. And so that's kind of job number one, I think, for the marketer, is to really be aware of what your customer's thinking about, how you tell your value prop to them in a meaningful way. And then to also just really be in tune with the personas that you're marketing to. Most of us in the B2B space are marketing to, it's complex. We're marketing to a lot of different buyers, buyer committees. And you've just got to be in touch with what all those teams and individuals are looking for, and what messages resonate. And so that to me is really critical. And just being really authentic to the brand that you are marketing. I think that staying true to who you are. I think what scares me a little bit right now is that everybody's panicking and people are trying to change course when you don't need to do that. It's not about changing 100% of how you talk about who you are as a company or brand. It's about just being more relevant and essential to your buyers today. And I think you go a little bit back to the basics with respect to that. But, I think all of us as marketers, more importantly now than ever, have to take a sort of a 360-degree view of the customer experience and make sure that we're looking at every single step along the way, and be relevant and be meaningful to the conversations that we're having.
I love it, especially right now when everybody needs that personalization, feeling like they care.
Yep.
And knowing that this isn't a time to maybe even sell. Maybe this is a hard sell. Maybe this is a time to give or to create more goodwill or more connection, because right now we have lack of connection that we are forced to have.
Right.
How do you create that connection? How do you create that goodwill?
Yeah, I think, it's an overused term, I suppose, but everybody talks about the word engagement. And I think now I have a lot of friends and colleagues in the market that are, have formerly run big events and are used to connecting with people in person. And you're moving from a physical connection mode to suddenly you're online. And so what do you do from an engagement perspective or an activation perspective to create the communications, but also make sure that you connect with individuals through all cycles of the buying experience? So if you think about the companies, every single company that we know in the, software world and other places that have had to move from physical events to virtual events, you can't recreate the same experience in a virtual situation. So what do you do and how do you do that? And how do you create communities that are meaningful where you're strictly in an online world? And so I think engagement is super key, and activations and treating people in an online fashion, trying to tier them. I'll give you a couple of examples that I think have been really interesting that I've seen with some of these virtual big events that have gone virtual, which is treating these people as unique individuals in the virtual selling process. As a CX level person, choosing to attend an event, I get a specific piece of communications, and then I'm sent a care package that is unique to me before I attend a couple of sessions for the event, to make me feel more part of the event. And I think that making those engagements and connections meaningful is really, really important right now. And I think some companies are doing that really well, versus just trying to put everything in a virtual Zoom meeting, and have just a ton of PowerPoint online. I mean, nobody wants to participate in conferences that are just PowerPoint online. And so I think companies that are creating those engagements are doing a great job.
Just to shift it a little bit, I'm also curious about how or if there are certain indicators or hallmarks of companies that are just on the cusp of having a big industry-wide impact.
I think companies right now, I'm a huge Salesforce fan. I think everything Mark Benioff has done with the company has, he created a major ecosystem a number of years ago. I feel like I've been part of it from the beginning. But what I love about what Salesforce is doing, and I happen to, have close friends sort of in that ecosystem, but what they didn't do, and I respect this about them, is they decided not to do Dreamforce as a virtual event, because Dreamforce has a brand. It has an expectation for how people, physically connect and network, et cetera. And so they decided to do other things. They decided to do unique experiences where from an account executive to a customer, you're going to connect people in a way that's meaningful for you. And you might call that a Dreamforce experience, but it's not a big event that happens in San Francisco. And so I think the companies that are doing really well are kind of shuffling the deck and not looking at just recreating the old and trying to do it a different way because we all have these restrictions with COVID. They're really looking at how can we create engagement, how can we create intimacy, and how can we protect the brand that we have such that it's not going to be different, when we all come back. And let's not forget, we're all going to come back next year at some point in 2021, God willing. We're all going to be back, and it's going to be raring to go in the software market. And the companies that kind of toe the line and be true to their brand are going to be the ones that survive.
Oh man, I can't wait.
Neither can I.
So this growth that we're talking about, or well, I should say the kind of companies where these indicators are happening and they're being really careful. I love that example about Salesforce and how they're being true to their brand. As you're looking at companies that do these kinds of things, what do you think the role of marketing is as this kind of growth is happening? Like how do things change when the company shifts from like a building mode to a growth mode?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and I'm not sure that this is a different answer that I would have given you have we not been going through the just sort of the unpredictability of the world we live in today with a global pandemic. I think it's really about marketing, getting close to the customer experience. I've had a long standing belief and passion about that for a long time. And, when I think about go to market as a marketing executive, I'm one leg of the stool. The other two legs are sales and customer success. And I think that the entire company has to be focused on the customer journey. And I think the most successful marketers today, pre-pandemic, post-pandemic, are going to be those that really understand the customer journey and look at it for the long haul, because it's not just about creating pipeline, it's about creating customers for life. And I know that sounds sort of Pollyannish perhaps, but that's the world we live in. And it's very competitive out there for most of us in the software world. And you've got to create customers for life, and customers that, even if you have buyers in companies that move to other companies, they're going to take you with them down the road if they are in the same industry, et cetera. So the customer journey, customer experience is paramount now. And as a marketer, if you're not focused on that, I think you will fail.
So as you're building this, it's fascinating to see companies like that creating, learning, growing, creating, learning, growing. It's almost cyclical, never ending. And each time you do it, I would imagine the marketing department is being almost reinvented because it has to reshape to now what the corporate goals are,
Right.
where the company's headed. How do you organize your marketing team to continue to do that?
Yeah. No, it's a great question. When you think about particularly early stage B2B companies, and I've worked at many of these, they start building the selling engine, and the selling engine is typically AEs with BDR kind of support to fuel pipeline growth. And then they have to hire customer success people to catch up with that. And then marketing kind of gets layered in, and it's all about net new customer acquisition as opposed to looking at the customer journey. I mean, one of the first things I did at Lean Data, and I think it surprised people, including our board, is one of the first hires I made was a head of customer marketing. And part of this came from, I've always had this function, but it was extremely relevant for me at Marketo, because when I joined Marketo, we got bought out by a private equity firm. Vista bought us. This was before Adobe bought Marketo. And my job became about protecting the Marketo brand for the existing customer and making sure that people knew that the Marketo that we were and you always loved, or the Marketo we're going to be in the future. And you could count on us and our same brand qualities and attributes. We're going to be the same things you knew and loved and the reason you bought us. And so I think customer marketing, and one of the things we coined it at Marketo was sort of the triple A of customer marketing. It's advocacy. A lot of companies focus on this, by the way. They focus on kind of actually advisory first, or sorry, advocacy first. They focus on customer references and partnership with sales, but it's really three things. It's about advisory, advocacy, and adoption. And if you can figure out how to build processes in your organization for those three things in partnership with sales and customer success, you will always have the foundation of kind of a core customer brand. That's what I loved about Marketo. I think we held that steady even through the Vista private equity acquisition. And certainly I brought that to the table at Lean Data, which I'm very proud of.
So I love that. What I love about that is that it puts the customer first, which we all talk about, but we just talk about it, and you actually did that. You put that in place right away. And that you hear so many times people just say it, but it's not, if you don't make action toward it and actually show how that can work, it's never going to work. So
Yep.
yeah, that's wonderful. I'm also curious about the corporate side of marketing and where that is today, and more specifically, what's different about corporate marketing today versus the other flavors of marketing and how they work together. Because at large companies,
Yep.
I mean, there are so many different levels, layers, and
Yep.
alignment. It's almost, my mind is blown at how much misalignment there could be and what can be done about more alignment with corporate marketing.
Yeah. Such a great question. And I'm always sort of fascinated by the way that I think marketers get mislabeled. We're seen to be, if we're called corporate marketing, we're PR people or communications people. And then you have demand gen people who are focused on revenue. And then you have product people if you're more technically oriented as a company. And I think that most of the people I know that are really strong marketing leaders have a balance of all three. Those of us that come out of the corporate world, and I'm one of those people, we come from a place which is grounded in, how do I position this company for growth? And how do I take a story or a narrative to market, and make the company look 10 times bigger than it is today? And so there's a ton of work that's done today, that is, influencer marketing and social media marketing, and certainly press and analysts and all the traditional stuff. But there's also a ton of stuff that's done internally to create the kind of storytelling one needs to tell, and the brand engagement. You've got to start inside the company first. And so employee engagement, um, getting the narrative understood inside the company, is, from a corporate marketing perspective, hugely important. It's not just about creating awareness and, and getting the story out there. You've got to get the employees to become brand advocates. And so I think that's been a big shift over the last 10 years as I've seen it in the marketplace. And I've seen my own career with teams change, where I have as many employee advocates as I do, customer advocates, for example. And so I think that's pretty critical.
It's very critical. I mean, you look inside of the company, and when you're introspective and you're looking at something, and then you start to speak your own speak, and you're looking at this everything almost like as if you've been there for years, and you start to think the same way you always have. How do you get away from that? Because eventually you don't want to turn into that person that says, we tried that, it didn't work, because maybe it wasn't tried exactly the way it should have been, or other flavors.
Yeah. I don't know if I have a magic recipe. What I will tell you is that, and I've always been one of these people, going back to my early days at Apple, where I believe that a brand lives inside the company before you ever have a brand outside the company. And so preserving and protecting and growing that brand has got to be an executive focus, and it's got to start at the top. So if you don't have a CEO that understands what engaging and evangelizing your brand is all about, if you don't have that at the heart of who you are, even if you're the most technical company. I can tell you that when I was at Informatica, incredibly engineering driven technical company, but when Sohaib Abbasi joined that company as the new CEO, I got him on board with the philosophy that he needed to steer the ship with respect to just brand engagement, and making sure that everybody in the company got behind who we are and how we were trying to shift and change. And I think that's probably even tougher for a technical company to do than what I've done in the last 10 years. I've done a lot of MarTech companies, and you could argue at the heart of MarTech companies, I use Salesforce as an example. They're more marketing driven companies, but when you're at a technical organization, to get your CEO to say, everyone in this company has to live and breathe our story and who we stand for and what our brand attributes are, that's how you grow. That is first and foremost how you grow. That's why Informatica went from a $300 million company when I was there to a $1 billion company. And they invested in the brand, and they invested in employee development around the brand. And startups don't necessarily get that as they don't learn it as quickly, but it's really paramount.
And so do you think that corporate marketing, the corporate role, is more or less relevant based upon what you're just saying?
More relevant.
Yeah.
More relevant. I think today you've got to create essentialness to grow. And it's not just about technical, speeds and feeds and, value proposition sort of tidbits. It's about, how am I going to change the buyer's experience to make the buyer more successful in their whatever they're doing, whatever their role is. They could be, and again, I've had very technical roles where I've sold to IT infrastructure teams, and I've had sold to a lot of, line of business professionals. I think it really has to do with, how do I move the journey of that customer along and here's my dogs now in real time. Okay, Louie, chill. Um, how do I make that customer stronger, better, and a hero in their organization? And I think that that's what a corporate marketer needs to do today, is figure out how to do that, and how to make it sustaining and more effective and more essential.
That's good. There's a lot of tweetables in there. So now that you're consulting and advising companies at Alloy, what have you taken with you from your previous jobs, and what have you thrown overboard and said goodbye? There's no space for this anymore.
Yeah, so this is still relatively new. So I consulted for I created Alloy in 2015, after I left VMware, and partner with some great people to do this. And my whole philosophy behind Alloy was, it wasn't about me as an individual consulting. It was about me and the power of my network, and having really strong relationships with people that could make the sum greater than the parts, if you will. And so I kind of have come back to that now. And so it's relatively new, but what I would say that I bring to the table is just a lot of innovation around go to market, strength, and how you think about building a go to market team. Obviously, I come from a space from the last couple years where I did a lot of work to personally evangelize a space called revenue operations, which is the idea that, and we've had this for years, by the way, in the software industry, where we have these incredibly talented operations people that really take data and people and processes and technology and create an entire revenue engine. And so I believe I can bring some of that power to the thinking behind go-to-market processes, and just making companies stronger in terms of fast growth. So I'm currently working with a company in the AI space that's moving really, really fast. They're in the supply chain area. New area for me, but they're really looking at fast growth, and I think I can help them apply a lot of learnings that I've done over the course of my go-to-market tenure.
And now I'm interested on the flip side of those best practices, the ones that you would call BS on. What are marketers doing that they should just stop doing?
Oh man. Well, I guess here's one thing I would say is, if you think about just the forced change that happened in the last 6 months, and this, I'll take, any B2B software company I've been at for the last 10 years. One of our primary methods of go to market lead generation was physical events. Those don't exist. So how do you do that differently, and how do you replace that? Because it's not just online events or webinars. So how do you think about engaging with your audience if you're not doing kind of the physical event circuit? And I think there's many companies that have done this really. I mentioned one earlier that, and it was Gainsight, by the way, that I think created an intimacy with their physical events that I thought was phenomenal. It made people feel very inclusive in the event, and, an intimate presence when you weren't technically showing up at Moscone or some, big event facility. So I think that kind of the old way, I think sometimes we need to just look at the old historical ways of doing stuff and question it, and see if we can do it a little bit differently. And I think that in the physical event space, we've started to see that.
Oh, that's a good, yeah, and it's going to change everything forever now that this is, we now know what we're capable of. And I
Yeah.
love how it forced us to create a different way instead of relying on, I do miss in person, don't get me wrong, but events needed to change. They hadn't changed. We needed a reinvention of some
Right.
kind. And I'm so that part is exciting to me.
And I think it also opened up a whole bunch of avenues um, for communities, for
Mm,
online communities,
amen.
where people were doing a lot more knowledge sharing, and you didn't have to be in person. I mean, apart from all the, physical limitations, etc. I think we've seen a ton more. I know I feel like I've seen a ton more content out there being generated now than I did when we had these physical avenues. So I think there's a lot of companies that have embraced this and done a really, really good job.
Oh, that's so cool. You and I obviously we could talk for hours because there's so much content to go over, but I'd love to leave with this one thing on what has you excited about marketing today and moving forward. What are some of the innovations and the things that you're looking forward to?
Wow. So I think technology obviously plays a huge role in all of our lives. And I think that what we've learned through this pandemic is that we can figure out how to do this, from a remote perspective and from a virtual perspective and still engage. But I also think it has meant that for marketers, the being more relevant is more critical than ever. And so I think my roots are in on the corporate side, as you know, and I come from a storytelling and branding perspective. And I will tell you the thing that I believe, and I hold this, to any marketer right now, is if your brand isn't relevant and if you're not presenting an essential reason for people to buy you, then you will fail. And so I think that more than ever, relevancy, essentialness, um, understanding your customer and now trying to engage with them in different ways is more important than ever. I'm a huge fan in which we talked about in customer marketing. I think that a lot of companies struggle because they think about just new net logo acquisition, but invest in your current customer base. All of us as marketers that are at B2B software companies or any other company have to think about upsell and cross sell and renewals. And so that's got to be 50% of your focus. You've got to partner with your chief customer officer and really understand how are we doing that and how are we creating the engagement in addition to the new logos, etc. So it kind of just comes to the heart of like, what's your brand, who are your customers, how are you communicating with them, making them feel good, and kind of carrying through on that promise. And I think that's kind of always been the heart of what I thought marketing was in the beginning, and I think we're kind of back to basics a little bit.
What a great way to end. Thank you so much. We're back full circle, right where we started as marketers. I love it, and yet so many options, so many ways to keep in contact and reach out and have a conversation. So,
Absolutely.
thank you so much, Karen, for being here, and I'm super honored to. I love the work that you do and everything that you create and how you think and what's possible. So thank you so much for sharing that with everybody here.
Thank you for having me. I feel the same and honored to be on the show today and just offer a little bit of insight and appreciate it.
Wonderful. We'll see you soon.
Okay, take care.